Hi, a question I get asked over and over by the people who have QCT5 Pro is how do I know which mode to use? So I will not be able to answer all the questions with what I'm going to present, but hopefully I'll be able to help you narrow it down a little bit. There's so many patterns out there, things that things about them that can matter which one you pick. So that's why it's hard to just give you one size fits all answer for them. But hopefully this will point some things out that will be very helpful to you in your deciding. Okay, so when you first tap on pantograph, it sets this. You have to set the safe area. I've already done that. And one thing I want to point out real quick is when you do set that safe area, it auto fills what that width is and that total height. And what that total height is actually what your machine's throat allows from front to back. Okay, so that total width right there, you don't want to leave that. That needs to be the wider number. When you set your total width on your quilt, it needs to be less. And you can always, once you change that, of course, then you've lost it. But it's up here in that yellow ruler. See that safe area, 43.67? So that's how you can come back to that number. If you've been using center placement and all of a sudden you're changed to 4-point, then come in here and see what that safe area width is. That for me, 43.67, and then come down here and if that's the same number, then it needs to be smaller or your safe area larger. So I just want to tag that there at the start before we get started. Okay, so when you tap on panto mode, you have these choices. If you have gold, you have advanced. We're not going to talk about that. But I'm going to tap on basic first, and then we'll come back to it later. And the reason I want to start with basic first is, well, one, if you've upgraded from beginnings, then this is the screen that will look familiar to you, with the main difference being that now you can enter however many rows you want, and you can enter a total height of your entire quilt. You're no longer limited to the throat of your machine. So this screen should look very familiar to you. And with the basic mode, you can do everything that you can in Power Panto and Easy mode. You could stay in basic mode if you wanted to, but for certain things, Power Panto and Easy mode makes things faster and easier. With basic mode, you have all the choices, as you can see, but we're going to go on to Power Panto now. And so one thing with Power Panto is, as you can see, there's no place that tells you pattern numbers across or row numbers down. With Power Panto, this is automatically figured for you. There is also no staggering. If you have a pattern that the odd and even rows need to be staggered with each other, you cannot do that in Power Panto. You have these flip choices, but that's not the same as staggering. So I'm going to show you a pattern that is really easy with Power Panto. Let's see here. I'm going to use Urban Elements, a little bit of this. And before I even open it, you can see that it's going to require nesting, okay? So I'm going to open it, and immediately the screen is autofill. Now I need to change my total width. So one thing that's unique about Power Panto, it works best if you will be stitching off the edges. At a minimum, stitch raw edge to raw edge, but it's really nice if you stitch a little bit off. So my quilt top, the width, is 38.5 raw edge to raw edge. So if I wanted to, say, give myself ½ inch on either side to stitch off, you may not want that much, or you may want a little less. So I'm going to go ahead and give my total width 39.5, okay? And then the height is 44.5. I'm going to be able to cut it off at whatever point I want. I'm just going to go ahead and say 46. I'm going to increase it all I want to. Okay, so now it is a little hard to see, so I'm going to tap on the magnifying glass, and usually you need to add a little bit of vertical spacing. Otherwise, the patterns tend to touch each other. You can kind of see right there. They're going to touch each other. I need to put a little bit of spacing between them. And there's no rule, or it's just when you think it looks kind of balanced and it looks good. If you were to go too far, you would be able to tell it. Horizontal spacing is something you must be very careful about using because, and I'm gonna go crazy here. So you can see where it starts to separate right there. That would give you blue dots and jump stitches. So I tend to leave the horizontal on 0. I have yet to actually use a pattern that needed it. So to answer the question, well, what patterns work here? Oh, and I also want to show that if you're like, well, I want that leaf to be bigger. Then you're just tapping on the plus to make that pattern height be whatever you want it to be. And then you would tap on fit and tap on the X, and now you're back here and you would save it. So what pattern works really good in here? One that nests where the rows fit up into each other and you're going to be stitching off all the edges. That's a pattern that will work super great. That's not to say that you can't use other patterns. You certainly can. I'm just saying this is wonderful right here. This Power Panto excels with this kind of pattern. Okay, so I'm going to X this out and I'm going to select another pattern, and I'm going to pick circuitry because it has a little different look to it. And again, I'm going to do that. So you can see that these lines are on top of each other. So I'm going to go ahead. There's no nesting here, but I still need to add some spacing. And I'm just spacing it so that the space between is the same as the pipes above. Okay, so that one will work even though it's not a nesting one. That's fine. And then see, let's pull up another one called Scrolling Vine. It gets used a lot. And it looks good. It's not one that really nests. You could add a tiny bit, I guess, but I don't think you need to. When I say it doesn't nest, that means I'm going to blow it up all the way here. So when something doesn't nest, that means the lowest stitch of the row above and the highest stitch of the row below are on the same line, you might say, okay? So this is another one. There's no nesting, but it looks very nice. It looks very nice, okay? Now the pattern I'm going to select for you is one that does not look nice, okay? It is in my Creative Stitches, and it is the Wayward Feathers. So when you look at that, you're like, I need for the alternate rows to stagger with the row above it, but that's not a look that I can get in here. So I'm going to go on to easy mode at this point. So I hope that this has helped you see with Power Panto. Basically, most patterns will work whether they nest into each other or not. But if you need to stagger, then Power Panto is not your choice. Okay, so now we're going to go to easy mode. Okay, and with easy mode, you do get to see the patterns and rows. They are figured for you though, okay? You can't tap on them. So the patterns and rows are determined by the height and width over here, okay? One thing you can do is you can stagger in here. Now, when you do these little hearts here, it's not letting me do because I don't have a pattern. But if you see how the word stagger is in black, if it's grayed out, then you'll have to change the heart. Oh, and one thing I meant to show you, so I'm going to show you right now, is in the QCT Facebook page, under Files, there is this file right here. It's called QCT5 Pro Power Panto Quick Reference. And all of these little yellow blocks have a number that goes down here. And this will answer a lot of the questions you have about what you're seeing on your screen, okay? All right, so back to easy mode. And while I'm on the topic, the same with easy. There's also a quick reference for easy mode, and it, again, the numbers correspond to down here, and will tell you things that you need to know about what's on the screen. Okay. So something about easy mode is you can't have a partial row at the top. Now, if you have a height that's longer, then you can, if you're using center placement, then you have the diamonds feature where you're able to cut off wherever you want to. But up at the top, the only way to take out gaps if you have a nested pattern is if you want to stitch, you'd have to stitch up into the batting, okay? So you'd have to stitch up there. Or if you have gold, then you can use Eclipse to take those gaps out. But other than that, you're kind of stuck when it comes to a pattern that does a lot of nesting. So we're going to select that first pattern that we did. It was Urban Elements, a little bit of this. We're going to open. Okay, and when it first opens, it doesn't auto-fill the screen like Power Panto does, okay? You just get that one pattern, and then it's up to you to decide what pattern height. And there again, same with the width and the height. You're deciding where as far as the width, where do you want the leftmost stitch to hit, and where do you want the rightmost stitch to hit. So that's up to you, and you can go into your ruler, and where you have that slanted green line, just move your needle to where do you want the leftmost stitch to hit. Maybe you want to stitch outside, or maybe you're staying within. Maybe you're going to be folding your backing over for your binding, so you don't want to stitch off the edge if you're going to do that. So you may want to come in 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or whatever. So that's something else to be aware of. And one thing about easy mode, it is awesome for when you are staying within borders, because if you are staying within a border, you really don't want to use a nested pattern, because if you do, you're going to have gaps right off the bat right there, and that's not going to look very nice. So love easy mode for stitching in between borders, but you need to use a pattern that's described as B2B. Okay, so what you would do then is, regardless of whether you were stitching off the edge or within the edge, then just tap on that left edge and then move over and do the same thing, whether you're gonna be staying within a border or staying within the raw edge or outside the raw edge, and you'll use that that ruler for that. Okay, so now we need to decide what size we would want, but really we know we don't want this, or we think we wouldn't, because you would have a big gap at the top. So what if I just say 7, and then whatever size you pick, and it's going to auto adjust for to maintain that height and width ratio right now. So you know that you're going to have to grow it a little bit, so tapping on that just to make it nest. And now the pattern's 9, so that's not so bad. But look, I'm going to tap here. I'm going to drag my screen down. So now you can see there's going to be 2 inches, and that's going to be noticeable. 2 inches of gaps at the top, that would be noticeable. So you either have to be willing for that 2 inches, and these leaves that stick up that 2 inches, you'd have to be willing for them to stitch up into the batting. So that's not fun, stitching into the batting. So I would not recommend this pattern for that simple reason, because you're going to have a lot of gaps at the top. Okay, so let's X this pattern out and let's try that circuitry. Okay, again, we need to give it a pattern height. I'm just pulling one out of the air. Okay, and you always need to tap on center, and you have to unlock the lock, and that's able to fill the screen. So now, let's see, I must have left it. Yeah, I left this magnified. So I tapped on the word fit and X. So now we can see the whole screen. But we can see that we need to separate those. So I'll go back in here, and I'm going to, let's see, I think in this case I need to shrink. So, and you have the step size. So if I shrink that, that's probably going to shrink it a little too much. I'd have to change the step size. But you get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to tap on fit and the X. And so this is something unique with easy mode, is that it kept you nicely between the top and bottom, okay? So that's why this pattern works great. Even though we use the shrink icon, it still looks great because it finishes off nicely at the top and the bottom. So you're not having to stitch up into the batting to not have gaps. Okay, so one thing that you do want to watch for with easy mode, just because it fits nicely like this still doesn't mean it's great, because you have to look at where is the beginning stitch and where's the ending stitch, okay? So you're kind of paying attention to that. That's if you're staying within the border, okay? If you're gonna stitch off the edges, yeah. If you're gonna stitch, yeah, I'm messing it up. If you're gonna stitch off, we'll just reset. If you're gonna stitch off the edges, you want to pay attention to where is the beginning stitch gonna be and where's the ending stitch gonna be. So I'm going to select the scrolling vine, because there's something very unique about it. And we'll just say 8. Okay, and we're going to tap on center, and yes, so now it fills to the side. If I were stitching between borders, even though this one, we already looked in Power Panto and said, yes, this is one that does not nest. There's no need to move the rows into each other. It looks perfectly fine, just like it is. But the problem is, and I'm going to blow it up so you can see, if you were staying between borders, look where this beginning stitch is. It's 1.5 inches from where that leftmost stitch is going to hit. So that's something to pay attention to, is that. And then look over here at this side. You see some real gaps going there. So this would be one, if you're going to use it, I'll tap on fit and X. It's not that it's not usable in easy mode. It's great in easy mode because all you had to do is give it a pattern height and it filled out everything for you. But this would need to be a quilt that you were going to stitch off the edges just to allow for the side gaps, okay? So there's that. And now I want to show you the, let's see, this was in My Creative Stitches, and the one that needed to stagger, this one, which is Wayward Feather. So we're going to open it, and I'll just leave that pattern height like it is. But you can see this does not look nice. It does not look nice. So what you have to do, you know what, I'm going to change this pattern height to be 5. I wanted to add another pattern just to make it more obvious. So we do need to stagger this. And so there again, if we were able to use it like this, then it would be wonderful between the borders, because you can see there's no beginning or ending stitch that's going to cause a gap problem. So that's great, but it does need to be staggered. So one nice thing about easy mode is the odd rows or even rows are, in a sense, already selected for you. They're already selected if you want to stagger, if you want to flip the odd rows horizontally or vertically, or same with the even. So that's another thing that makes easy mode faster, is that all of those rows are, with one tap, everything is already staggered for you. So if I tap on just the word stagger, then immediately all the even rows are staggered by half a pattern width, and you can tell this looks so much nicer, okay? All right, so I hope that helps clarify easy mode a little bit. If you're gonna use a pattern to quilt within the borders, let me select another pattern, and bright, and this one. And this is one that I would probably let me take that stagger off. Okay, it kind of toggles through. I would probably change this to tiny because I can see a bit of a gap, okay? So I'd probably increase it by just a tiny little bit, just so that there's no obvious gutter between them. And then what's nice with this one is because it's so minimally staggered, you're still going to be fine if you're going to use this between borders, because you're not going to have a gap along that top edge of that top row that's going to matter. And then something else that's nice is with this particular pattern, do you see where that beginning stitch is? It's right there even with where the leftmost stitch is. And then go over here and look at where the stitch ends. It's even with the rightmost stitch. So that's something to look at with easy mode if you're going to be staying within borders. And this pattern just shows that beautifully, that this one would work so great. It barely nests, and it also starts well and ends well. So I wanted to show you that one. So B2B, that's what B2B means, is it works good if you're quilting between the borders, okay? So quilting between the borders, easy mode is wonderful because you're going to be able to enter, like with this quilt right here. I know that these blocks are 6 inches across, so the width is 30, and then I know there's six inch blocks down, so that's 36. And so just immediately, the easy mode has taken the parameters that I've entered that's in between these borders, and it's perfectly figured it for me. So that's great. Okay, so another thing that easy mode is great for, because it's doing that figuring for you, is when you're wanting to do a border, okay? So I'm going to go into the little ruler, and I'm going to pick the one that does both the height and the width. Just to show you, I'm going to tap there, and I'm going to come over here and tap in this lower corner there. Okay, and that has created, in effect, this skinny border here, okay? I'll say apply measurement. Okay. So, and I need to X out that pattern. So I'm going to select a pattern, and I want my creative stitches, and I'm going to pick the candlelight. This may be too small, but so right now it is already figured the number of patterns across, maintaining the height and width ratio, but I would want it to go edge to edge, so I'm going to say center. And you could be doing a corner, but with this one, you could probably get away with not. So just that fast, I have been able to select a pattern for a border, or it could be a sashing, wouldn't matter. But I've been able to select it that quick, and then I would place it as a single pattern. I wouldn't be doing so in zones, because I would want the placement choices that you would use with a block. And so that's another thing with easy mode is whatever is on your screen, if that will fit, if that will stitch in between your rails, then you can place that as a single pattern, okay? And you could do that with any of the modes. You find reasons with easy mode that this is a very nice choice when you do have that. Sew-in zones is when what's on the screen, you'll have to advance your quilt in order to quilt it all. But for things like sashings and borders, easy is wonderful. It's wonderful. Maybe I'll change the height so that it's 2 inches and change the pattern height to 2. That way you'll make it see it a little better. Let's see. We'll select a different pattern. You know what? Let's just select one that comes with QCT. And now I would tap on center. Yes, I want to unlock the lock. And just that quick, I have the perfect number of patterns across, okay? All right. So there's other things on the screen, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of when you can use easy mode. Because bottom line, what matters is are you quilting off the edges or not, and is the pattern a nested one or not. So there's things that you have to look at when you go into basic mode, okay? So the pattern I'm going to pull first is, it was in my Creative Stitches. It was the one that needed to be staggered, okay? And so right off, I need to know how many across, how many rows down. Nothing about basic mode figures that for me. I have to do it all by myself. So let's see. And in fact, I'm going to give this, I want to make it be a little bigger, just so you can get a better idea of things. Okay, so this is just my way. I'm not saying it's the way. You could do it just by eyeballing things. I'm going to make this be 6, okay? So look at that. It's like, well, what? So if I tap on the patterns, then I can tap until they overlap or almost meet. Well, these started to overlap, so I think 3 patterns across is what I want. And now I can go ahead and tap on the hearts on the top hearts, because those are the ones that are going to connect things very nicely. And then I could either start tapping on rows until the pattern height changes back to 6, or I could say, let's see, 6 times 8 is 48. Let me just go ahead and do some easy math, and then I can start adding a little more. 9 rows gets me at 6.1, so that's good. But I need to stagger them now. All right, so all are selected. So now I need to select alternate, okay? And alternate is a toggle between the odd and the even row. So you decide, do you want the odd row selected or the even row selected? And then, like if size were selected, you'd need to tap on move so you get to the word stagger, because all of these choices give you different selections right there. So stagger comes from where you have move selected. So now when I tap on stagger, now I get the pattern halfway. Well, what if I didn't want it halfway? Then I can start using these blue arrows. I could say, well, I want to be in control of a partial stagger. I don't want a half pattern stagger. So that's just something about basic mode, that you have a lot of control. So with basic mode, you're not limited by anything, okay? You're not limited by whether you want to go off the edges or stay within a border. Everything is okay in basic mode. It's just a matter of what you want, okay? So you don't have to watch for things like you need to watch for in Power Panto or Easy, but just to re-verify, if the pattern will work for what you want to do in Power Panto, it's much faster. If what you're trying to do, the pattern will work in easy mode, it's faster. And easy mode is really great, you know, with the borders. So I hope that that has kind of helped answer a few little questions. There's also a quick reference for the basic mode that has all the numbers that go with the numbers down here that explain everything. To go into simulation mode, that's your best friend. There's also a quick reference for the quilting interface, but that's getting outside of what this was for. I really just wanted to point some things out about patterns, and as you use the different modes, because like right now you see all this stuff, okay? You see the patterns, the rows, all of that. You jump to Power Panto, that goes away. So Power Panto is the one that's great for stitching off the edge, okay? And then and one that doesn't need to be staggered. So that's the two biggies. And then when you choose easy mode, then you have a little more choices. Your odd and even rows are automatically selected for you to stagger, but you have to watch your pattern. Are you going to stitch off the edges or not? And what about up at the top? If you're using a nested pattern that nests very much, then you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have gaps if you use it or stitch up into the batting. So watch that. If you're staying within borders, then just because a pattern barely nests or doesn't nest, it still may not be a great pattern, because you need to look and see where's that beginning stitch, where's that ending stitch. Because if that beginning stitch is here and that ending stitch is here, you may end up with some gaps. So watch that. So I hope that this has helped take away a little bit of the mystery between the modes. And you can always ask questions on the QCT Facebook page.